In 1998, two automotive giants shook hands on what they called a marriage made in heaven. German luxury car maker Daimler-Benz and American icon Chrysler announced a $36 billion merger that would create the world's fifth-largest car company. The CEOs literally toasted with champagne on live television. 9 years later, Daimler would practically pay someone to take Chrysler off their hands, selling it for just $7.4 billion to a private equity firm. That's a loss of nearly $30 billion. Enough money to buy every single person in New York City a brand new car. The Germans lost more than just money. They destroyed two legendary brands, eliminated 40,000 jobs, and wiped out $50 billion in shareholder value. This wasn't just a bad deal. It was the worst merger in automotive history, and most people slept right through the warning signs. Today, you'll learn how cultural arrogance, hidden agendas, and a fundamental misunderstanding of business turned what should have been a powerhouse partnership into a financial catastrophe that changed the auto industry forever. If you want to understand the economic stories that shaped our world while everyone else was distracted, hit that like button and subscribe to The Sleeping Economist. Ring the notification bell, because we're uncovering the financial disasters you completely missed and the lessons they hold for your money today. Chapter 1. The Perfect Storm Setup. This brings us to May 7, 1998, when Jürgen Schrempp, the CEO of Daimler-Benz, stood next to Bob Eaton, Chrysler's CEO, at London's Dorchester Hotel. They were announcing what they called a merger of equals, a phrase that would later become infamous for being completely untrue. But to understand why these two companies even considered joining forces, we need to understand the economic pressures crushing the auto industry in the late 1990s. The global car business was experiencing something economists call overcapacity. Basically, car companies could make way more cars than people wanted to buy. Factories worldwide could produce 80 million vehicles a year, but consumers only bought about 60 million. That's like having a restaurant that can serve 100 customers but only 75 people show up. You're still paying for all those empty tables. Car companies were desperate to get bigger to survive, believing that size meant safety. Daimler-Benz, maker of Mercedes, was German engineering royalty. They built cars for executives and celebrities, vehicles that cost more than most Americans' annual salary. Their Stuttgart headquarters looked like a fortress of precision, where engineers wore lab coats and tested door hinges 100,000 times to ensure perfect operation. They owned 37% of the luxury car market, and their three-pointed star logo meant the best or nothing. Chrysler was completely different. Based in suburban Detroit, they were the scrappy American underdog who'd nearly died in 1979 before Lee Iacocca saved them with government loans and pure determination. By 1998, they were making massive profits selling minivans to soccer moms and Jeeps to adventure seekers. Their Ram pickup trucks were flying off lots. They had $7.8 billion in cash and were earning $2.8 billion in profit annually. Here's what made this combination look brilliant on paper. Chrysler was incredibly strong in America, but had basically zero presence in Europe. Daimler dominated Europe but struggled in America, selling just 90,000 Mercedes annually. Chrysler made affordable family vehicles. Daimler made expensive luxury cars. Chrysler had the best-selling minivan. Daimler had advanced diesel technology. Together, they'd have 442,000 employees, revenues of $130 billion, and sell 4 million vehicles across every market segment, from budget cars to luxury sedans. Investment bankers from Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse First Boston painted a picture of synergies, a fancy word for saving money by combining operations. They projected $1.4 billion in savings the first year, growing to $3 billion annually by year 3. They'd share technology, combine purchasing power, and eliminate duplicate operations. What could go wrong? Chapter 2. The Marriage Built on Lies. But here's where it gets interesting, because from day one, this merger of equals was built on a fundamental deception that would poison everything that followed. When Schrempp and Eaton shook hands, they told the world this was a partnership between equals. The new company would be called DaimlerChrysler, headquartered in both Stuttgart and Detroit, with dual CEOs sharing power. The stock would trade in both countries. Germans and Americans would share the board equally. Schrempp even learned to say Chrysler, the American way, instead of the German Chrysler, to show respect. The numbers looked fair too. Even though Daimler was paying a 28% premium over Chrysler's stock price, Chrysler shareholders would own 43% of the combined company. Not quite half, but close enough to seem equal. Chrysler executives were promised they'd keep their independence, running their operations from Auburn Hills, Michigan, just as they always had. But Schrempp was playing a different game entirely. Years later, he'd admit to a German newspaper that calling it a merger of equals was a deliberate trick. If I had gone and said Chrysler would be a division, everybody on their side would have said, "There is no way we'll do this." He needed Chrysler's board to approve the deal, and he needed to avoid paying an even higher takeover premium. So he lied. The warning signs appeared immediately. Within weeks of the merger announcement, key Chrysler executives started getting pushed out or marginalized. Bob Lutz, Chrysler's legendary product development chief who created their hottest vehicles, was told his services wouldn't be needed. Tom Stallkamp, Chrysler's president who'd revolutionized their supplier relationships, found himself reporting to German executives who didn't understand the American market. The cultural clash was immediate and brutal. Daimler executives flew first class. Chrysler executives flew coach as company policy. Germans held formal meetings with prepared presentations. Americans preferred casual discussions over coffee. Daimler spent $100 million on their company Christmas party. Chrysler ordered pizza for working lunches. German engineers took 3 years to perfect a cup holder. Chrysler designers sketched new ideas on napkins and had prototypes running in months. By November 1998, just 6 months after the merger, Bob Eaton announced he'd retire early. The dual CEO structure was dead. Schrempp was now sole commander of the empire. Then came the executive exodus. Within 2 years, 2/3 of Chrysler's senior managers had quit or been fired. The Americans who'd built Chrysler's remarkable turnaround were replaced by Germans who viewed Detroit as a backward outpost needing German discipline. The stock market started catching on. DaimlerChrysler shares, which had peaked at $108 in January 1999, began a steady decline. By September 2000, they'd fallen to $53. Analysts who'd praised the merger's brilliance were now asking uncomfortable questions about why the promised savings weren't appearing. Chapter 3. The $30 billion breaking point. The real catastrophe began in November 2000, when Schrempp made a fateful decision that would cost shareholders billions. Chrysler, which had been earning $2.8 billion annually before the merger, suddenly announced it would lose $1.5 billion that year. But this wasn't just about market conditions, it was about systematic destruction from within. Schrempp had installed Dieter Zetsche, a German executive nicknamed Dr. Z for his walrus mustache and stern demeanor, as Chrysler's CEO. Zetsche's prescription for Chrysler was like performing surgery with a chainsaw. He immediately cut $2 billion in costs by firing 26,000 employees, 20% of Chrysler's workforce. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were engineers who understood American consumers, designers who knew what features Americans wanted, and salespeople who'd spent decades building dealer relationships. The Germans fundamentally misunderstood what made Chrysler successful. Chrysler had thrived by being fast and flexible, launching new products in 18 months while Mercedes took 4 years. Chrysler's Plymouth Prowler, a retro hot rod, went from sketch to showroom in record time. Their PT Cruiser became a cultural phenomenon. But now every decision required approval from Stuttgart. A simple change to a headlight design meant flying to Germany for committee meetings. Here's a specific example that shows how bad it got. Chrysler engineers wanted to use a Mercedes transmission in a new model to save development costs. Exactly the kind of synergy the merger promised. Mercedes refused, saying it would dilute their brand. But then Mercedes forced Chrysler to delay their own transmission development to avoid competing with a Mercedes launch. Chrysler ended up with neither option and had to rush an inferior solution that caused quality problems. By 2001, Chrysler lost $2 billion. The company that had $7.8 billion in cash when they merged was now bleeding money. Their market share in America dropped from 16.2% to 13.5%. The Chrysler PT Cruiser, one of their last pre-merger designs, was selling like crazy. But there was nothing in the pipeline to replace it, because German management had killed new product development. The financial markets delivered their verdict. Kirk Kerkorian, Chrysler's largest shareholder who'd supported the merger, sued DaimlerChrysler for $9 billion, claiming fraud. He argued that Schrempf had lied about the merger of equals, and that German management had deliberately destroyed Chrysler's value. Other shareholders joined class action lawsuits. By 2003, DaimlerChrysler stock had fallen to $29, a 73% collapse that wiped out $70 billion in market value. Chapter 4. The devastating fallout. The failure wasn't contained to just stock prices. It rippled through the entire automotive ecosystem, destroying lives and communities in ways that spreadsheets couldn't capture. In Detroit, the merger became known as the German invasion. The city that had already suffered from automotive decline watched as another pillar crumbled. Those 26,000 lost jobs meant 26,000 families without income, leading to foreclosed homes and emptied neighborhoods. Suppliers who'd built their businesses around Chrysler relationships found their contracts canceled as Germans brought in European suppliers. Small tool and die shops that had operated for generations closed forever. The dealerships suffered too. Chrysler dealers had invested millions in showrooms and service centers based on promised new vehicles that never came. Instead, they got rebadged German cars that Americans didn't want. The Chrysler Crossfire, basically a Mercedes SLK with different styling, was priced too high for Chrysler buyers and not prestigious enough for Mercedes customers. It flopped spectacularly. Meanwhile, Mercedes itself was suffering. While management focused on fixing Chrysler, they ignored problems in their own luxury division. Mercedes quality ratings plummeted from first place to 28th in J.D. Power surveys. The company that had built its reputation on bulletproof reliability was now making cars with electrical problems and rust issues. They lost their leadership position in luxury cars to BMW and Lexus. The financial damage kept mounting. In 2005, Chrysler lost another $1.5 billion. In 2006, losses hit $1.4 billion. Schrempf had been forced out in 2005, 3 years early, with a golden parachute worth $50 million, not bad for destroying $70 billion in value. His replacement, Zetsche, finally admitted what everyone knew: the merger had failed. By February 2007, Daimler announced they were looking to sell Chrysler. But who would buy this wounded company? General Motors looked but walked away. Nissan's Carlos Ghosn, known for dramatic turnarounds, said it was too damaged. Finally, Cerberus Capital Management, a private equity firm named after the three-headed dog guarding Hell's Gates, agreed to buy 80% of Chrysler for $7.4 billion. Think about that math. Daimler paid $36 billion for Chrysler in 1998. They sold it for $7.4 billion in 2007. But it was actually worse. Daimler had to pay Cerberus $1.6 billion to cover Chrysler's pension obligations, so they essentially gave Chrysler away and paid someone to take it. Including operational losses and restructuring costs, analysts estimated Daimler's total loss at $30 to $40 billion. Chapter 5. The bitter aftermath. The story didn't end with the sale. Like a car crash that keeps causing pileups, the Daimler-Chrysler disaster continued claiming victims for years. Cerberus thought they could flip Chrysler quickly for profit, but they'd bought a company with outdated factories, demoralized workers, and no competitive products. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, Chrysler ran out of cash. In April 2009, Chrysler declared bankruptcy, one of the largest industrial bankruptcies in American history. The U.S. government had to step in with $12.5 billion in taxpayer bailouts to prevent complete collapse and save remaining jobs. Eventually, Italian automaker Fiat took control, later merging with France's PSA to create Stellantis. Today, the Chrysler brand barely exists. They sell just 2 models in America. The company that once commanded 16% of the U.S. market now has less than 2%. Plymouth is dead. Thousands of jobs are gone forever. But here's what makes this story even more tragic. It changed how businesses think about mergers forever. Before Daimler-Chrysler, executives believed cultural differences could be overcome with good management. Now, business schools teach Daimler-Chrysler as the ultimate warning about cultural incompatibility. The phrase merger of equals became a red flag that sends investors running. The disaster also accelerated automotive globalization in unexpected ways. As traditional companies struggled with failed mergers, new players emerged. Toyota became the world's largest automaker. Korean brands like Hyundai and Kia, once considered jokes, grabbed market share from distracted American and German companies. Tesla emerged during this chaos, revolutionizing the industry while traditional automakers were busy destroying each other. For Germany, it shattered the myth of superior management. Germans had believed their engineering discipline and process excellence could improve any company. The Chrysler failure proved that arrogance and cultural blindness could destroy value faster than engineering could create it. It remains a source of national business embarrassment, studied in German business schools as their worst ever international acquisition. The human cost was staggering. Beyond the 40,000 jobs lost directly, economists estimated another 100,000 jobs disappeared from suppliers and related businesses. Entire Michigan towns that depended on Chrysler factories withered. Skilled workers who'd spent decades perfecting their craft found themselves unemployable. Pension funds that had invested in DaimlerChrysler lost billions, affecting retirees who had nothing to do with cars. Chapter 6. The Human Lesson. So what can regular people learn from this $30 billion disaster? The lessons are more relevant today than ever, especially as we watch companies merge at record rates and promise synergies that may never appear. First, when executives use phrases like merger of equals, be skeptical. True partnerships between large companies almost never exist. One culture will dominate, and it's usually not the one that needs dominating. If you work for a company being acquired or own stock in one, watch for early warning signs, executive departures, changed policies, and especially when promised independence starts disappearing. Second, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Daimler and Chrysler looked perfect on paper. Complementary products, different geographic strengths, potential cost savings. But German and American automotive cultures were fundamentally incompatible. Germans valued precision and long-term planning. Americans valued speed and flexibility. Neither was wrong, but forcing them together destroyed both. This applies to your own life too, whether you're choosing a job, a business partner, or even a spouse. Cultural compatibility matters more than what looks good on paper. Third, beware of arrogance in business. Daimler executives genuinely believed German management was superior to American management. They couldn't conceive that Chrysler's informal, fast-moving culture had value. This arrogance blinded them to Chrysler's strengths and led them to destroy exactly what made Chrysler profitable. When you see executives or companies claiming they have all the answers, remember that pride comes before a fall. Fourth, financial engineering isn't real engineering. The investment bankers who promoted this merger collected $500 million in fees and walked away. They had no stake in making it work. Today, when you see complex financial deals promising huge returns, ask who's getting paid up front and who bears the long-term risk. Usually, they're not the same people. Here's something practical. If you're an investor, watch for companies making large acquisitions outside their core expertise or culture. The failure rate for big mergers is around 70%. But cross-cultural mergers fail even more often. When a company announces a massive acquisition, especially with vague promises about synergies, consider it a warning sign, not a buying opportunity. For employees, the lesson is about protecting yourself during mergers. The Chrysler workers who saw the warning signs and left early found new jobs while the market was strong. Those who believed promises about job security were still there when the layoffs came and the job market had weakened. Don't let loyalty blind you to business reality. Finally, understand that size doesn't equal strength. Daimler-Chrysler became the world's fifth largest automaker, but size made them slower, not stronger. While they were busy fighting internal battles, smaller, focused companies ate their lunch. This applies whether you're choosing investments, picking an employer, or running your own business. Focus and agility often beat size and scope. The Daimler-Chrysler disaster wasn't just about cars. It was about human nature, cultural blindness, and the danger of believing your own hype. It showed that you can destroy in months what took decades to build. Most importantly, it proved that no amount of financial engineering can overcome fundamental incompatibility. Today, as companies merge at record rates, promising digital transformation and unprecedented synergies, remember Daimler-Chrysler. Remember that $30 billion can disappear when cultures clash. Remember that mergers of equals rarely are. And remember that sometimes the best deal is the one you don't make. If stories like this, where we uncover the economic events that shaped our world while most people weren't paying attention, fascinate you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started with these financial educational mysteries.